The rain came down in hard, stinging drops, each one slicing through the cold night air like needles. Sarah Miller pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, head ducked against the wind. Her sneakers squelched in the mud as she hurried along the forest path, the dim beam from her phone's flashlight barely cutting through the curtain of rain. This wasn't where she wanted to be, not in the middle of the woods, not in the dead of night, and certainly not with her 7-year-old son waiting alone at home. But the world doesn't care what you want. Her old sedan had coughed its last breath on the lonely backroad, and with no phone signal, she had been left with one choice: take the forest trail to cut the distance in half. The wind whispered through the trees, 1,000 overlapping voices that made the path feel alive. She kept moving, trying not to think about the ghost stories she'd heard from locals, the ones about hunters disappearing, campers never returning, people claiming the woods swallowed them whole. Sarah didn't believe in those tales, but she wasn't in the mood to test them either. She was halfway through when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the creak of branches or the rustle of leaves. It was softer, but human, a muffled thud followed by a sharp, desperate cry. Help! Sarah froze mid-step, her breath caught in her throat as she turned her head, scanning the darkness beyond the narrow beam of her phone light. The rain made it harder to pinpoint, but there it was again. A voice, weak, pleading. Is someone there? She called out, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound steady. No answer, just the heavy silence of the forest, broken by the distant rumble of thunder. She should have kept walking. Every instinct told her this was how horror stories began: someone goes off the path and never comes back. But she thought of Daniel at home. What if it was someone's child? What if it was someone who needed help and no one else was here to give it? Hello, she tried again, louder this time. A faint groan answered her. That was enough. She shoved her phone into her pocket and pushed through the dripping undergrowth, her shoes sinking into the mud with every step. The trees seemed to lean closer as she moved deeper, their twisted limbs reaching down like claws. Then she saw it, a mound of freshly disturbed soil, no more than a few feet from where she stood. It wasn't part of the natural forest floor. She could see the harsh, uneven edges, the leaves clumsily scattered over the top as though to hide it in a hurry. Sarah's stomach knotted. She knew what this looked like. Her heart hammered in her chest as she stepped closer, eyes scanning the dirt. That's when she heard it again, louder this time. A strained, choked voice from beneath her feet. She dropped to her knees before fear could stop her. Rain plastered her hair to her face as she clawed at the mound with both hands, the cold mud squelching between her fingers. She dug faster, ignoring the sharp twigs that tore at her skin. The thought of what she might uncover made her heart seize, but then her fingers scraped against fabric. Her breath hitched. She pulled harder, revealing the shoulder of a dark, expensive-looking suit. More frantic digging and then, a face. It was a man. His skin was ghostly pale, lips trembling as he gasped for air. Mud clung to his hair, his suit, his lashes. His eyes, sharp even in their panic, locked on hers like she was the first real thing he'd seen in hours. Hold on, Sarah gasped, getting her arms under his and pulling with all the strength she had. He came free with a wet, sucking sound, collapsing against her in the mud. He coughed violently, spitting out dirt and rainwater. His wrists were bound tightly with coarse rope, the skin underneath raw and bleeding. You're okay, I've got you, she said between ragged breaths, her adrenaline masking the cold that bit through her soaked clothes. But the man didn't thank her. He didn't even seem relieved. Instead, he grabbed her wrist with surprising strength and yanked her closer. His voice was hoarse, cracked, but every word was deliberate, and chilling. They'll come for you now, because you saved me. For a moment, Sarah's mind went blank. The rain seemed louder, the forest darker. She didn't know who they were, but the terror in his eyes told her she'd just stepped into something she couldn't walk away from. Somewhere, far off in the woods, the sound of an engine rumbled to life. And it was getting closer. The low, guttural growl of an engine grew louder, vibrating through the wet earth beneath Sarah's knees. The man's grip on her wrist tightened, his knuckles white despite the mud. His eyes darted toward the trees, scanning the shifting shadows as if they were alive. They're here, he said, voice low, urgent. Sarah's pulse spiked. Who? What's going on? He didn't answer. Instead, he struggled to his feet, every movement stiff and painful, but driven by a raw instinct to survive. We have to move, now. Sarah hesitated, glancing toward the faint glow of her phone in her pocket. She could call for help, but there was still no signal out here. The man noticed her pause and stepped closer, his voice sharp and cold. If they find you with me, they won't just bury me again. That was enough to get her moving. They crashed through the undergrowth, their steps muffled by the wet leaves. The forest seemed to close in around them, the skeletal branches forming a cage overhead. Sarah's breath came in ragged bursts, every inhale burning her lungs. Behind them, the rumble split into multiple engines, heavier, faster, followed by the metallic clank of doors slamming shut. And then, voices. Male, deep, commanding. They barked orders Sarah couldn't fully hear over the rain, but she caught certain words. Find him. No mistakes this time. Check the trail. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they might hear it. The man stumbled, catching himself against a tree. In the brief flicker of moonlight, Sarah saw the fine cut of his suit beneath the dirt, the glint of a watch that looked like it cost more than her year's rent. He didn't belong here any more than she did. What did you do to them? She whispered, voice shaking. He met her gaze, his eyes haunted. I didn't do anything, except know the truth. And that's enough to get killed for. Before she could press him, the sharp crack of a branch snapping behind them jolted them both. A flashlight beam danced across the trees, slicing through the darkness. Run, he ordered, his tone no longer a suggestion. They tore through the forest, mud sucking at their shoes, branches whipping at their faces. Sarah's mind flashed with images of Daniel waiting at home, probably curled up on the couch watching cartoons. She couldn't die here, she wouldn't. The noise behind them grew closer. Whoever was chasing them knew this terrain well. Their movements were fast, precise, closing the gap with every second. Up ahead, through the trees, Sarah spotted something, the faint outline of a wooden structure. There, she hissed, pointing. They reached it moments later, a small, weather-beaten shed leaning to one side, its roof sagging under the weight of years. The man wrenched the door open, shoving her inside before following and bolting it shut. The air inside was damp, thick with the smell of rotting wood and rust. Rain drummed against the roof, masking their ragged breathing. The man leaned against the wall, working at the ropes around his wrists with a jagged piece of metal he'd grabbed from a shelf. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched her bag to her chest, listening to the voices outside. They were closer now, too close. What do they want from you? She whispered. He didn't look up from the rope. It's not what they want from me. It's what they want to erase. There are things powerful people will do anything to keep buried. Literally. The rope fell away, revealing raw, rope-burned skin. He rubbed his wrists briefly before locking eyes with her. You don't understand, Sarah. By digging me out, you've made yourself part of this. They can't let you walk away now. Sarah's stomach twisted. She hadn't told him her name. Before she could ask how he knew, a beam of light cut through a crack in the shed wall. Heavy footsteps crunched against the wet ground, circling the shed like predators testing the pen. Her breath hitched as the doorknob rattled once, twice, then stopped. A moment later, the sound of boots splashing through puddles faded into the distance. The man didn't relax. They're not gone, he said, almost to himself. They're regrouping. When they come back, they'll bring more. Sarah wanted to demand answers, who he was, what danger they were in, why these people would kill for him, but something in his eyes told her the truth would only terrify her more. In the next second, the silence shattered, the sharp roar of engines starting again, this time moving around to cut off every way out of the woods. The man reached for her hand. There's only one way we get out of this alive. And it's not waiting here. The door splintered as shadows moved in. Sarah clutched a rusted crowbar, her hands trembling. The man pulled something from his soaked suit pocket, a waterproof flash drive. This is why they buried me, he said. Evidence. Enough to destroy some of the richest and most dangerous people in the country. Bullets tore through the wood, sending splinters into the air. The man grabbed Sarah's hand. If we survive this, I'll make sure you and your son never live in fear again. They darted out the back, disappearing into the darkness as the shed went up in flames. Sarah didn't know if she was running for her life, or toward a destiny she had never asked for. But one thing was certain, that whisper in the woods had changed everything. The forest seemed endless, each step heavier than the last, but Sarah refused to stop. The man, battered, bleeding, and barely able to stand, still moved with the determination of someone who had survived the impossible before. Behind them, the glow of headlights grew dimmer, swallowed by the twisting paths and thick fog. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, Sarah could see the faint orange glow of sunrise breaking over the horizon. For a moment, She thought they had made it. The man slowed, turning to her with an expression that was both grateful and deeply troubled. You saved me, he said quietly. But this isn't the end. They won't stop until they've erased every trace of me, and now, that includes you. Sarah swallowed hard. Then tell me who they are. Tell me what we're running from. He hesitated, then pressed a small, mud-stained flash drive into her palm. Everything you need to know is on here. Keep it safe. If they catch you, destroy it. Before she could speak, the sound of distant engines rumbled again, faint but closing in. The man's eyes hardened. We have to disappear. And just like that, they vanished into the waking city, two strangers bound by a secret buried deeper than the grave he'd escaped. Sarah didn't know if she'd saved his life, or just walked into the start of her own nightmare.